That's what good religion actually does, is it provides a space for you, your tribe, your people to enter into like fundamental aspects of your own humanity.
See, I'm here for that.
Amen and amen.
That sounds good to me. Between belief and unbelief, faith and doubt, certainty and uncertainty, there is space. Each of us is thrown into this place to love, to ache, to rage, to heal, and to experience the wonder and the mystery of being. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to The Wonder and the Mystery of Being. This is episode 24, and it's called Good Religion versus Bad Religion. And my guest today is Justin McRoberts. Now, before I introduce Justin, there's a couple things I should say. The next few weeks, things are going to be a little bit different. I am traveling, and so I'm going to be recording these intros and outros from wherever I happen to be. So starting today, things might, in the intro and outro look a little bit different. But I've pre-recorded enough conversations to get me through this time that I'm traveling. And so, there shouldn't be any interruptions in the schedule. So, this episode is an episode that I actually recorded, in person on my deck in front of the Airstream, with my friend Justin McRoberts. Now, Justin McRoberts is a musician, a speaker, a writer, and I met him on tour a few years ago, and he's just a really interesting guy. He is a Christian, and he, obviously we were on a Christian tour together, but right from the very first time I met him, I got this sense that there was something different about him compared to a lot of the people that I knew in Christian music. And I didn't really feel like I fully understood what that difference was until he and I had this conversation just a few weeks ago that I'm about to share with you. So it's an awesome conversation. I hope you really, really enjoy it. We talk a lot about some of our influences, Nietzsche, Heiddeger. We talk a lot about what healthy religion might look like, and some of the negative aspects of religious practices and communities and experiences that both of us have sort of encountered in our time. Justin has a new book called It Is What You Make of It, which is all about the process of taking your circumstances, your raw material in your life, and making something amazing from it, which I think is a really great sentiment. I do want to point out that at no point in our conversation or in his book are we talking about people who have truly horrific circumstances. Like, we're not trying to say, like, oh, people that are in horrible, abusive situations should just make the best of it. Like, that is not what he is saying, and that's not what we're saying in this conversation. So I felt like that was worth saying up front. Justin's book is geared towards creativity and talking about it is what you make of it within the context of doing creative work. I sort of extrapolated that idea to talk about religious practices, because I felt like that could be a meaningful way to reinterpret what he's saying. But yeah, I just wanted to say all that up front. I hope you guys really enjoy this conversation between myself and Justin McRoberts. We've already won. It's been like a year of lockdowns and not seeing people.
Yes.
And we're outdoors, we're doing this safely. Don't give me any problems in the comments, guys. Well, this is the first interview. I'm assuming you like bourbon.
I do.
Okay, all right. I just kind of went for bourbon.
It's a good decision.
This is the first interview in person for my show, and this is the first interview outside the Curiosity, which is what I've named the Airstream.
Yes, I remember.
And yeah, you just happened, we wanted to do this anyways, but you just happened to be in San Diego.
Yeah.
And you live in San Francisco.
I live outside of San Francisco.
Okay, so you say San Francisco when you're talking to someone that doesn't know San Francisco.
Actually, the specific thing I say is I'm from Oakland.
That's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to claim San Francisco. It's sort of like Gotham versus
Sure.
Metropolis.
And it's like, and also if someone tells me they live in Oakland, I'm always like, oh, so like, you can handle things.
That's exactly my point.
That's usually my
San
impression.
Francisco, just go. Oh, you're a softie.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having
Of
me.
course. You're here in San Diego.
Here in
What
San
are you
Diego.
doing here anyway? We didn't even talk about that.
I'm down here with my family. We're just getting away. We just did a little
good.
jaunt down here.
That's good.
We call it a vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a number of those during quarantine where we just had to get out and experience a change of scenery.
Yeah.
Like we went to Lake Arrowhead last fall, I think. And my kids played in the snow for more or less the first time. And I'm Canadian, so like that was
It's the thing
like,
for you.
I was on the verge of tears the whole time because I was just like, this is such a special moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we get away only a couple times a year. You might experience this a little bit where, like, having traveled a bunch, if I have downtime, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to travel. So vacation and rest for me has more to do with, like,
I'm
we've
down
talked
to travel always.
Well, so I guess I'm down to travel. It's like I don't want to do all the family logistics
Oh, right.
stuff. That's what I mean. Like I'm cool if it's just me. Like,
Oh, that's easy.
That's
Have
easy.
you? Okay,
But
so
me and 2 kids and my wife, that's a lot.
yeah.
So all of a sudden, like it's a lot of planning.
Well, in my experience of traveling with kids, like I've only done flights with kids a handful of times.
Y'all drive?
Well, I mean, a lot of times, like Lake Arrowhead, we drive obviously because that's only a couple hours from here. But like we've flown, but like my kids are 4 and 2, so it's just we haven't had as much time as how old are your kids again?
10 and 3.
Yeah, so you at least with one you've had a little bit more time to
Yes.
do the traveling with kids thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember like our first time we went to Costa Rica with the kids 2 years ago, and it was just like a mountain of stuff with these little bitty cartwheels underneath, and we're just like, I'm pushing it along. I was one of those people I always felt bad for. You're just
You're like that poor sucker.
that guy.
As you're
that
like
looks
quick schlepping your way through the
miserable.
airport like this.
Well, because
guy
when you
doesn't know what
tour
he's
as a
doing.
musician, you have hacks for everything.
Everything.
You know, it's like you could basically you've figured out how to minimize the number of steps you need to take carrying gear. It's like I'll take the hotel shuttle, I'll go to the curbside check-in, I'll walk my stuff like 10 feet and then check in there.
Yep.
And then when we get to the other end, it's like hopefully
it's
the same thing.
Because it's worth the $4 tip, 10 and a half to like maneuver inside. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, you were that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
But dude, I'm excited to have this conversation because we have so
Yes.
much in common. And I suspect we haven't even plumbed in our personal conversations. We haven't even plumbed just how much.
Right.
But we both have a history in music, and you have a podcast as well, which I've been on.
Yeah.
And it's called C Podcast.
At sea.
At C. I
Did you
knew.
see- That's all right. But the at symbol, it's not you. It's
Even
my
when
branding.
I said that, I was like, the way that I'm saying this, I don't know that it's wrong, but it feels wrong.
I have a branding problem. and I have for years. I have a titling and branding problem. So I like the visual.
At sea makes more sense.
Right, no shit. So, like, at sea, the whole, like, it came from the idea, there were these 2 quotes, the one, oft-quoted C.S. Lewis notion that we settle for making mud pies when instead a vacation at sea, or a vacation at the sea is available to you. The other one was somewhere in the midst of his writing, Nietzsche dropped this line about truth, which we should definitely get into. He said that that everything, the sea is stormy, but everything is at sea. So like, yeah, it's bonkers out there, but you don't really have a choice. Like, if you really want to get, if you really want to get into this,
whatever that's from, I don't think I've read it.
Yeah,
I have read some Nietzsche, and I do love Nietzsche, but that sounds quintessentially Nietzsche.
Well, that's his thing. It's like if you really want this, if you actually want to pursue this thing you call truth, like you don't get to. It's not controllable. Like it's out there. It is chaos. So it's not like it's not in the harbor. yes, the sea is stormy, but everything is at sea. So that was the heart behind the podcast.
That's great.
And so when I went to brand it, I was like, and I used the at symbol.
Yeah.
And visually it works.
Yes.
But then,
somehow I missed the at.
It's just a symbol. That's why. Because it's been in the English language for like 4 years or something.
Yeah. Wait. I mean, that's interesting. At what point does a symbol enter the lexicon as like a part of language?
Because it's a word in and of itself.
Yeah.
The at symbol.
That's interesting.
Yes.
So music, podcast. You've also put out a number of books.
Yes.
And you have a new book coming out.
I do.
And I was looking over. You sent me I felt so privileged because I got like
the watermarked one.
Yeah, I got a PDF. You sent me a PDF with like the watermarks, and I'm like, I felt like I'm reading a script to like the Avengers or something like that because I'm like not, burn after reading or something like that. But it is what you make of it.
Yes.
That title and that theme throughout the book. I felt like I kept thinking about all the various ways that phrase works for me. And before we even get to like the way that it, you lay it out in the book, I kind of wanted to explore some of the like ways that phrase can apply to all kinds of stuff.
Please.
I mean, one of the things that on this podcast and this show that we talk about a lot is just sort of faith deconstruction and like,
yes.
And as we're recording this now, I don't know exactly when I'm going to put this up, but as we're recording this now, we just had Easter.
Yes.
And it was my first Easter as someone who has publicly basically become a non-believer.
Right.
Now I'm missing a lot of nuance by saying that,
yes.
But that's the simplest way to put it.
As does almost all categorization.
Yeah. So it was a weird time for me to be like Christmas was easier to manage because Christmas it feels so secular, right?
It's already been so undone and dissected, and it's already become, I'll just say it out loud, it's already become damn near meaningless. From a religious perspective.
Yeah, which is
you have
easier,
to fight to make Christmas
which makes it
thing.
easier for me to handle.
Yes. Whereas Easter is like, without
Easter
this,
is much
it all
more
comes
charged.
apart.
Yeah. So yes. I had this experience as Easter was approaching, and like on Good Friday, a friend of mine tweeted, and it was a joke. I don't think it was meant to like make fun of religious people. It was just funny, and they tweeted Jesus. It's called What Friday? And like,
right.
And I thought that was funny. Now, I would have thought that was funny when I was a Christian. Like, I still would have found that joke funny. So I wasn't poking fun at anyone. But the fact that I like interacted with that tweet, people saw it and were like, why are you making fun of religious people? And I'm like, and all of a sudden I got really insecure. And I'm like, I'm not. I didn't mean to. But it was just like it set off for me this sort of like... over Easter, this like, well, I feel weird about Easter now.
Yes.
And that, in the context of that, I was pondering your book title and going like, okay, like traditions that we hold and rituals that we participate in can also be what we make of them.
Yes. They usually are.
Yeah.
It's actually the intention of the thing.
Yeah.
Is whether it's a personal practice or it's like a cultural meeting point on the calendar, the intention of the thing is not to that you enter in and it simply is this thing that you encounter as a monolith.
Yeah.
It's a practice, it's a space. So what do you do with Good Friday?
Right.
It has everything to do with if you are someone who is in the journey in some way, shape, or form of undoing and laying things down, then Good Friday is this day where you look at death and the same way that Ash Wednesday is you recognize your own mortality.
Ash Wednesday I knew nothing about growing up.
Really?
No, because the circles that I came up in, the sort of charismatic evangelical circles, like Ash Wednesday wasn't a thing that, at least not that I remember.
It's a great day.
Well, I mean,
or it can be.
It's
it
very,
depends on what you do.
Well, no, it's really interesting. I find it really. See, it's one of those religious traditions rooted in, I mean, is Catholicism really, right?
Depending on how you mean it, yeah. I mean, it's like that's like the actual practice, like the traditional shape of it is like more rooted in Catholicism.
Right.
And Eastern
But it's
Orthodox
like a tradition that I have no baggage with.
Right.
So
because you never played with it.
I never participated in it
Right.
growing up. So it's like, so I'm sort of like fascinated by it without feeling weird about it, other than the fact that it is a little strange to see people like putting ashes on their forehead.
Yes. Yes. And again, that's the thing of like, what does that mean for you?
Right.
Ash Wednesday, Good Friday. What does that mean for you this year?
Yeah.
Like, to recognize one's own mortality, like that's just basic humanity.
Yeah.
Ash Wednesday provides a moment in time in which I actively do that.
Yeah.
I pause and say, from ashes to ashes. This is me. This is my life. Like, I am going to die. What do I do with that in that moment?
Yeah,
that's what.
What did you do with it this year?
I was like that. That's what good religion actually does. Is it provides a space for you, your tribe, your people to enter into like fundamental aspects of your own humanity.
See, I'm here for that.
Amen and amen.
That sounds good to me.
Yes, that's the good stuff.
Yeah,
every year, we've talked a little bit about this.
Yeah.
I've been around death a lot.
Yeah.
As a person, like by the time I was like 25 or 30, I'd been around or conducted like 19 funerals. By the time I was 25.
Wow.
And not that pace didn't continue, but I've seen and been around a lot of death. So every Ash Wednesday, every entrance into the season of Lent for me ends up being a place in which like I'm so used to emotionally confronting in some way the end of life, mine or other life.
Yeah.
So I get to stop and make actual room for that because like other aspects of life, and again, this is good religion. I don't have time for it. Like that's real. I just don't have time for it.
Mm.
And good religion oftentimes says, "Hey, I want to give you some time to pay attention to that because you know it's important and you feel it in your guts.
Yeah.
So let's make some space for that." So Ash Wednesday, the entrance into like the invitation to pay attention to my own mortality and to do that all the way through the entire season of Lent, up to Good Friday, in which like I recognize the participation of the divine in death, which in and of itself, theologically, otherwise, is like fascinating and beautiful and wonderful.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And again, what do I do with that? And which then hopefully leads to some sort of joyous engagement with Easter, which was different this year for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that's, for me, that's good religion. It's like that I have space to engage with my own humanity in ways that serve me in the moment I'm living in.
See, that's so interesting because when I hear you talk about religion, it feels expressed in your life in a way that's different than what a lot of people I feel like have experienced, at least in the people a lot of the people that I talk to, or the circles that I sort of came up in.
Is it the cusses?
Well, the cusses help. But there's certain people I've encountered where religion, or faith, or however we want to describe it, it sort of like seeps into every crack of their life in a way that's subversive and beautiful, and it bears fruit in their everyday life, mm-hmm. right? And then there's other forms of religion that feel like they, instead of seeping up from underneath, they occupy from above, and I think that is something that a lot of people have felt yes. in various religious spaces.
Yes.
And that's the form of religion that I feel like a lot of people, especially now, and I would count myself as one of these people,
yeah.
are not willing to live with anymore.
Right. And what you're describing is the difference between the process of becoming,
yeah.
which is like it's seeping into my life, I'm being formed and I'm forming, I'm participating, I'm in conversation, I'm formed and being, I'm becoming and I'm being formed, versus control.
Right.
I'm going to get a hold of it as much as I possibly can, socially, theologically, institutionally, financially, and then use it as tool to form the world around me. And even as I say it, I'm like, that's gross. Like, it's gross to want to do that. It also seems like the kind of thing that even like very early biblical references might have warned you about. That there's a warning right at the beginning of your book. It says not to do this, and here you are. That if you want to make the world according to your own understanding of good and evil, if you want to control like that, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
And that's the problem folks generally have and should have with bad religion. It is almost exclusively a matter of control.
That's what it feels like for a lot of people. And, I mean, well, maybe we could, if you don't mind talking about sort of your own journey with that stuff. Like, how did you grow up as far as religion or faith or whatever? And then how did your life how did that change for you over time?
My mother grew up Catholic. Mm-hmm. And then when she married my father, she put her faith practices, her religion on the back burner. Mm-hmm. So he was a pragmatist, like a strict pragmatist.
Yeah.
If he couldn't, and again, you can hear the control themes running through all of this. If he couldn't do something with it, he wanted nothing to do with it. Hmm. So religion was, it wasn't even just like religion's garbage or people who need it are stupid. It was like, there was an element of like religion is for weak people.
Interesting.
That was a thing I remember that about him. But more than anything else, he just like, of what use is it? Like, how does it benefit me to think these things? I have a mortgage to pay.
Was there a sense that like he felt like he was better off relying on himself than anything else? Or am I projecting?
You're definitely projecting. You might be right though. I don't know that he would have said it quite like that. I don't think, as a man, I don't think I know now, he didn't think he was better off. He was scared to death, literally. He just didn't find anything useful for his day-to-day. Like, in other words, life was scary enough.
Why
add more unknowns? Mm-hmm. Why add another piece of work?
So he
why add
preferred
more?
To like focus on what was at hand.
So both my parents grew up in poverty.
Yeah.
And for my dad, that resulted in, like, I have to work my ass off in order to keep, like, my life or the lives of the people I'm responsible for from falling into these same pits. And that became the thing. I've got to get my kids into college, just the one kid. I got to get my kid into college and make sure college is paid for. I've got to have the mortgage.
Oh, so you don't have any brothers or sisters?
No, I'm it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just me. And I'm enough.
That's amazing.
So for him, it was very pragmatic. Life in general was a matter of pragmatism. My mother's response to her poverty was very different. When she grew up very thankful. Not that he wasn't thankful in some ways, but like it wasn't close to his heart.
Yeah, I get that.
So for my mom, her like where her understanding of God lived was that everything was a matter of having been really fortunate and like didn't need to understand. So there wasn't like a control thing. It was just like I've been, she would use the word blessed. I've been blessed.
Yeah.
I've been really fortunate. She used the word fortunate. And that means like if insofar as I've been blessed and I have been fortunate, I probably will continue to be, which is like that's a faith step.
Yeah.
And so there was a bit of a tension there where like that was her posture in life and then my dad was on the other side. So I lived in the middle. It really wasn't until later into like tail into high school where I was having my own conversations among friends about faith things. We came in through the doorway of philosophy, like early reading Heiddeger and Nietzsche.
Oh, you got into Heiddeger? Heiddeger changed everything for me.
And should, if you read him well.
I'm not convinced I read him well.
Well, what I mean is it's bigger. Yeah, but it's bigger.
There must be people smart enough to really understand Heiddeger. I am not one of them. I get it enough to be like, wait, what?
Yes, it's disorienting.
Yeah.
Reading Camus.
Camus, please.
Right.
So Heiddeger, basically, early phenomenologist.
Yes.
So phenomenology is basically correct me if you feel like I'm getting this wrong, but it's sort of and I've talked about this on the show a little bit. But
you did a great job.
It's basically the study of subjective human experience. It's basically going like, hey, science, that is great, that's awesome, but science seeks to strip subjectivity out of everything because we want to know what's objectively true.
Yes.
And our human subjectivity gets in the way of that. So science, generally speaking, seeks to strip that away. But Heiddeger made the observation that most of what we care about in life has tremendous amounts of subjectivity.
Yes.
And so it doesn't make sense to analyze the world without that. So he proposed that we start with human experience and assume that everything we experience is real.
Yes.
Start there.
Yes.
And then build from there.
Yes.
And that changed. Well, honestly, at that point when I read Heiddeger, I was completely like, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in anything supernatural. The whole supernatural natural distinction is a problem. So
yes, it is.
We don't have to.
Which he does a great job of handling by way of his own phenomenology.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So that, and also I started thinking about spirituality and psychology as versions of the same thing, or at least overlapping significantly. So anyway, just for those of you watching and listening, like if when we're talking about Heiddeger, that's why I just freaked out.
Which is where so having read Heiddeger and then reading Camus and then finally coming into Nietzsche, we were shook by this notion because we were all of us in high school romantics. A, because you're in high school. B, because I was probably surrounded by other Enneagram 4s. I'm an Enneagram 4. Like we were all in drama class together. We're in doing theater. We're writing poetry. We're this crowd of folks. So what Nietzsche did, to some degree, with what Heiddeger did around phenomenology, is Nietzsche suggested instead of truth being this, again, monolithic,
objective,
thing out there, he says, and people find, and I understand that there's a problem with this language up to a point. He says, suppose truth to be a woman. This is Nietzsche. And then dives into this notion of like, what if truth is a thing to be romanced instead of a thing to be dissected and pursued? What if the pursuit of truth has more to do with this romantic relationship we have with ourselves, with our experience of life? What if there's romance in this pursuit? And that set us on fire about like, I could get with that. Because up until that point...
That's such an interesting idea. Wait, where did he write about that? I missed that.
That is in Beyond Good and Evil.
Oh, see, I've actually read Beyond Good and Evil, but apparently I missed that part.
Is it Beyond Good and Evil? I think it's Beyond Good and Evil. But suppose truth to be a woman. And what it did for us was it married the way we wanted to be living already, which is like I'm a 16-year-old kid. Like if it's about romance...
Yeah, I'm in.
Sign me up. I'll chase romance all day.
My body's flooded with hormones.
I'm super ready to go.
Let's go.
Is supposed to be a woman. Is she my age? Does she have sisters? Because we're all looking for... But it allowed us an entry point into the conversations that we had been dodging about truth, God, the whole mind. Because this was... My experience of life was romantic,
You
emotional.
were having these conversations at how old?
16.
Wow.
And the religious conversation, and in most of the philosophical conversations, which is what Nietzsche didn't like, were very like up here, and it's like your emotions don't play a part. Right. It's not about your experience of it. Right. There's a thing that's beyond your experience. The whole Karl Barth thing, where like there's your experience, and then like God is wholly other.
Right.
Maybe not. I don't know, but like that doesn't make me want to chase it. So I started getting interested.
That image.
No, yeah. I still don't. But I started getting interested in the conversations at 16. That then, the way it worked in my household was it sort of unlocked my mom a little bit to say, okay, this is a thing that's becoming true in my own household without me forcing it on my kid. Like she wanted me to believe something about the world because she felt like it made her life better. There was a comfort there for her.
Yeah.
She saw what was going on with my dad, didn't want that to happen for me. And it caused tension between my dad and I.
Wow.
And not in like a terrible, we had like knockdown, drag out fights kind of way, but my dad wasn't super stoked on my like...
engaging with any sort of spirituality or
again,
religion,
like hyper pragmatic. Like, are you gonna, you gotta go to college, get a job, pay for things so that when you die, you would have done all those things.
That is.
And so religion, poetry,
there's a generational
all that
thing happening there
very much
a little
so.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got in that. I came in through that doorway, and I've kind of stayed there for the most part. So I've been similar to you. I've been around a lot of relatively traditional Western evangelical stuff.
Yeah.
And I've never felt above it, and I'm still not. But I've never felt home.
You've never been ensconced in it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Because even the first time I met you, I remember being like, so the first time I met you, we were both opening for 10th Avenue North or something like that on a tour.
Yes.
And I remember like the very first night on the bus, you were telling hilarious stories. We were all drinking, and I remember just being like, I don't even know if this guy is a Christian. And you need to know that that's a compliment.
I get it now. Yes.
But I remember just being like, this is really interesting, because in the sort of CCM world that we were a part of at the time, the Christian music, like, it's a small community.
Yes.
Like, everybody knows everybody.
Yes.
And yet I didn't know you.
Right.
And so I was like,
because I was out in California.
Right. You're out in Oakland. Sorry.
I can handle things.
Yeah. You're out in Oakland. You can handle things. And so I just didn't know as much about you. And then I sort of like, immediately you felt like an outlier to me. And it's right now that I think I pinpointed it earlier too, but I'm really pinpointing it now. It's because you were coming into these spaces as a believer on your own terms.
Yes, and the door,
that's what it seems to me.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And so when I'll work backwards here.
Sure,
the person who brought me into the Christian music world didn't have a stake in a particular brand of Christianity. Frank Tate, who ran 5 Minute Walks, was like, 5 Minute Walk was his label. His whole thing was like, listen, if what you're doing helps people, let's get it out there.
Yeah.
That was his whole thing. There weren't like religious benchmarks. There wasn't like a theological litmus test. It was like, and he was a Christian guy, but like for him it was like 5 Iron Frenzy, Smiley Kids, Share a Young Word, me, like, if it's helpful, if it helps people, let's get it out there. Which again is this very strange marriage of like the sort of joyful hopefulness of my mother and the pragmatism of my dad.
I see that now.
Right, which is one of the reasons that I love Frank so much. I also, my introduction to religious practice was really specifically through a guy named Dave, who was a lot like Frank. And Dave's whole thing was, there's stuff happening in you that you don't quite get, and you're not supposed to understand it.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I love that. Here's this adult who's having a conversation with me about religion and telling me that it's not my responsibility to understand it.
And you're how old at this point?
18.
18?
That your responsibility,
he
said your responsibility is to
be
right. Your responsibility is to be faithful to this as best you can in the moment you are.
And it's okay if you don't understand.
In fact, it's not like that's not the job.
The game.
It's not the job. If you try to understand it. He knew then. I mean, he was like Jesus movement guy, so it's like all the controls are like, don't put any controls on it. He knew that because of my nature, like if I went after trying to understand it, control it, I would kill it. Which is totally what happens. And he was like, no, make it that romance. Like be pursued, understand if it comes to you, but like don't land there.
Yeah.
Because what do you understand at 18, 19, 20, 26, 27, 32? Nothing.
38.
No, 38. Because you'll be 50 someday, and you will have been wrong. And not because, and this deal, you will have been wrong for who you are at 50. You might have been right for who you were at 28. So just live.
Right.
So be there. That's great. If this is how the God thing works for you now, live there, be faithful to it as best you can. But hold it loosely enough that when you're no longer 28, when you're 34, married, mortgage, your faith can look the way it needs to for then. So if it works for you.
Right. What do you do with the sort of this is one of the sort of classic things I hear. I feel like most Christian, like theologians, thinkers, speakers, apologists, whatever, are allergic to anything subjective. Like obsessed with everything has to be objective morality, objective truth. And like what you're describing sounds much less objective than what.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, it's, I guess you're sort of making an objective claim. So it's like, it is objective at base, but it's expressed in a really subjective way. Like as you're describing even Nietzsche, like romancing the truth and how it's a thing that might grow with you. Like that doesn't sound very objective. Like what do you do when you're confronted with like people who are like married to a more objective idea of what truth has to be?
In relationship, like that's a conversation, and I can there are things that I need to believe fundamentally in a given moment, and that serves my time. That's where I'm at. So that's where they are there. Okay, be there. If what you need right now is to feel like you have pinned it, if that's what you need, then that's what you need. And you need that kind of security. And let's be honest, a lot of what we've experienced among like the hyper-religious is a crap ton of insecurity.
Oh yeah.
And so a lot of the
fear.
And a lot of the way religion gets expressed and sold has to do with trying to quell that insecurity. So, it's not enough to be what is evangelicalism at this point, like 53 years old, 55 years old. It's not enough to be like a 55, 60-year-old religious movement in this one corner of all human history. No. This has to be like the way it is.
The truth.
It has to be the truth and the experience of truth and the expression of truth. Even as I say that out loud, you can hear like the fear, the control, the insecurity. This has to be the way it is.
Yeah.
No. You're 55, 56, 65 years old as a religious movement, and people have been experiencing the divine for the whole of humanity.
Yeah.
So, live in your moment, be excited, great. Do your thing, be humble, and let go when the time has come, which is, by the way, now.
Yeah.
by the way, now, evangelicalism, the time has come, and learn to let go.
The last year, I mean, has changed everything. But I'm really interested with. I'm still like sort of. I think I've always been a little bit mystified to your approach to faith, because it's like, I feel like I could sit you down with any of my atheist friends, and like, you would get each other.
Sure.
And I feel like I could sit you down with any of my Christian friends, and like you would get each other.
Sure.
And I just don't. I honestly don't entirely know what to do with that.
Great. Sit me down with your friends.
No, but you know what I mean, right?
I like people, and it's a massive compliment, and like I feel that.
No, but
here.
There's very, very few people that I could think that about.
I would hope that would be a person's experience of the divine, period. That regardless of where you're sitting, that's how it would feel. In other words, like, if we want to talk in terms of like a subjective and an objective things, if there is, insofar as there is, sure, fine, let's just say. So insofar as there are things, there is objectivity with regards to like divine truth. If Karl Barth is right on any level and there's this whole otherness, I can't be responsible to that. Like, I can't be. I can't be fully responsible. I can honor that, and the way I honor that is to be humble enough to live in my moment and be responsible of my moment. So the relationship in religious practice between objective truth and subjective experience is, I don't have the wisdom, the wherewithal, or the freaking time to, like, get my damn head around objective, immovable, fun, like, cosmic truth. I can't. What I can acknowledge, like, fine, if that's true, then I will just be as responsible as I can to my experience of that truth in the moment, and I'll hold it loosely because I know I'm smaller, I know I'm not, I lack the wisdom, and I lack the freaking time to do that. So that, for me, that's the practice. Even if I'm holding to, there is such thing as objective divine truth. Even if I hold to that, I can't be in the moment responsible to that. The way the Tao Te Ching opens is to say that the name.
I literally was about to bring that up. The Tao that cannot. The
name that can be named is not the eternal name.
Yeah.
Oh, come on now.
The Tao that can be told is not the eternal and unchanging Tao. So the Tao, I always am fascinated by the fact that the Tao is typically translated as the way.
Yes.
And the earliest Christians were called followers of the way before they were called Christians.
Yes.
And then also in The Mandalorian.
But it's also the way C.S. Lewis writes at the tail end of The Abolition of Man, is instead of making references to God, because he was recognizing at that point in his career that the word God came with a set of controls that would undermine what he was trying to do with the book.
Well, that's
so he started referencing the Tao. He said this is the way it works in Chinese lore. It's this thing called the Tao, which disoriented his readers to be like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the whole what is this thing should always be the way I'm approaching anything remotely like the divine. What is this thing? If I'm approaching the divine, it should be disorienting in the same way that Heiddeger is. It's like, this is a philosophy that kind of forces me on my heels.
Oh, yeah, it's really difficult to get your head around.
Yes.
Phenomenology and the whole idea of the Tao. Like, that's the reason why, and for those of you like watching and listening, like the reason, you hear me bring up this line from Tao Te Ching occasionally. And the reason why I come back to it so frequently is because what it's basically saying is the minute, like if you're talking about God or the divine or whatever word we're going to use, something transcendent, something other, the minute you name it or say that you know it or try to describe it or define it, it slips through your fingers.
Yes,
the minute you say it, you've made something else.
In psychotherapy, the way this would play out is instead of making references to you, I would reference my experience of you. In other words, I would say, if you and I had a couples therapy moment and I was like, John just freaking, I can't, it's like, he does these, and she would say, tell me about your experience of John.
Right.
And what I could reference responsibly, and you're just John,
is your experience.
I can reference my experience of you. I can speak only slightly, a little bit of like who John is as John. I can speak of my experience of John.
Right.
That's what I can be responsible.
But it's not a complete picture.
No, and and insofar as that's true of you and that's true of me, should that not always, in every way, shape, or form, be the way I approach, speak of, reference any experience of anything remotely like the divine? Is like, I'm disoriented, I can only know a little bit, I can mostly talk about my experience of it.
Yeah.
So insofar as there is some sort of an objective thing called John in the world, like, okay, that might be objectively true, but I only can speak of my subjective experience of you. That doesn't deny you your objective reality.
That is very helpful.
It just means like I can only speak of my experience of you. So I can be responsible to you by saying this is what I know of you by experience.
Right.
Same with everything. Bourbon.
Yeah.
Same thing with the bourbon. Same thing with the divine. I can speak of my experience subjectively, and that's my responsible. That's how I'm responsible to anything objectively true about God.
That's really interesting. I mean, this theme of the ultimate or the infinite being like inherently unknowable, like it's a theme you see across belief systems.
Yes.
I mean, there's some members of, some that practice Judaism spell God G-D, because they don't even want to name God as God.
Yeah.
So there's like all these like things we see, and I think like what you're describing, the kind of religious practices, faith that you're describing, that is something that a lot of people that have gone through this deconstruction process would look at and go like, okay, like I'm okay with that.
Yes.
But it's this other thing, this top-down controlling sort of institutionalized thing that demands that you be a cog in its machine or something. I don't know,
and get it, like, and to understand it, and not just understand it in a certain way. To which I would say, then don't do that thing.
Yeah.
When I was 10, maybe 11, and I had broken my arm for like a second time, and I walked into Dr. Apple's office and sat down, and he came in, and I didn't know it was broken yet. It was green and swollen. And I came in and he says...
And you felt sick to your stomach, probably.
Oh, yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, like, I've had that.
So he comes in and he said, so how you doing? I said, it hurts when I do this. And he said, well, don't do that. And but like, the thing is, like, there's actually some wisdom to that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, just this religion thing, I feel guilty, I feel small, I feel stupid, I feel controlled. Okay, then don't do that.
Yeah. Okay, but that's revolutionary, though, because... for a lot of people that grew up in certain religious circles, they were taught to ignore that feeling.
Yes.
Of like when you feel like, oh, I need to get away from this, or oh, this feels not right, or something like that. It's like there's a lot of people that were trained to deny their own gut instincts, to their own desire, their own... I mean, it's disembodiment, right? It's like people pulled out of this sort of living in a sort of a unified way, and like, yes. and being
as a whole person.
Yeah, being taught to distrust themselves,
which isn't the worst thing in the world. Like
it can be.
Well, no, I mean, to distrust yourself up to a point is part of wisdom. And be like, I can't be fully trusted to know everything about even myself all the time.
But that's a different thing than what I'm talking about. Like, what I'm talking about is the displacement of your own ability to discern.
Yes.
And the replacing of that ability systematically with controlling ideology and theology.
Yes. So
that's what I'm talking about.
And it's the discernment process there that is key. So instead of training that moment along the lines of you're experiencing discomfort and fear, let's figure out why that is.
Yeah.
Are you afraid of this particular conclusion? Are you afraid of losing friends? Are you what is the actual fear and discomfort here? Instead of doing that, it's if you're experiencing discomfort, that's probably this, which we need to get rid of so that we can keep you in the tribe.
Yeah.
So instead of actually entering into the moment of discomfort, because the shared pain or trauma of being a teenager in evangelical spaces, being scared that I have to hold my own faith together or I'm going to go to hell. So if I don't get the answers right, if I don't understand,
well, that's the thing.
If I don't understand God, or if I drop the ball somehow, I'm going to blow this thing. So if I'm holding my own faith together, that fear should be entered into. Like, that's a good fear. That's great. And you're probably wrong about it. That's what I'm saying. Like, you don't have to trust that. Like, here's my fear and I know exactly what it means. But the discernment process is the thing that gets actually skipped. It's not like if you're scared, get the hell out, period. In some cases, yes. But instead of that, like entering in and be like, so what is it you're actually afraid of? Because if you're afraid of getting this thing wrong because you're going to go to hell, let's talk about why that is. As opposed to like, well, like, just don't be afraid.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's just a thing that I've heard from a lot of people that I've spoken to over the last year. Mm-hmm. That, I mean, and I've seen from people coming out of some of the more harmful religious spaces where people very often will start to trust their own gut instincts a little more, start to realize that, hey, like, I'm living in a body, and that body is telling me things sometimes, and maybe I should like pay attention to that, and like not that you're a slave to it, but that you shouldn't just arbitrarily shove it down whenever it's trying to tell you something. And so one of the things I've seen is for some people who go through this sort of deconstruction process. I mean, I get using that word is tricky, but it's the one we have at the moment. It kind of seems like
it works.
But for a lot of these people, I noticed there sometimes this experience is associated with a sort of a sense of learning to stand a little taller. Like I see it in Jess, for instance. Like she over the last couple of years has conquered an eating disorder. She's like experienced a lot of growth in her own sort of just ability to be sure of herself and confident, but not in a way that she beats people over the head with, but she's more comfortable in her own skin. I can see it. She stands a little taller. She's a little, more sure of herself. Even when we have an argument, she's a little bit more like, hey, I don't have to freak out, and I also don't have to shrink.
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah.
And that's something I've seen happen with a lot of people. So I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah.
What has your so you're a teenager, you're thinking and processing things that I only processed maybe 20 years after that. What did the next following years look like?
I followed my young life leader. So I started practicing my Christianity in relationship to a young life leader. Young life's it's like youth ministry stuff for kids that don't go to church.
Right.
And I followed him on to Young Life staff because I needed it. And it wasn't even like I was just sold out on I've got to tell people about Jesus necessarily. It was I don't know how to do this. And I like him.
Yeah.
In fact, that was really the thing for me. It was I like the way this person lives his life. I like the way he is towards me. I would like to figure that out.
Yeah.
How to live that way. So I followed Dave onto Young Life staff and did life the way Dave did, as best I could, for a few years, which put me in a relationship with a lot of teenagers. And from the standpoint of faith and faith journey stuff, I mean, the machinery would say, and I'm not anti-Young Life. I love Young Life as an organization. But the machinery would say that the goal is to get kids to make some sort of a confession of faith. One of the things, right? Yeah. The problem I ended up having was I just liked kids too much to try to get them to do anything. And I'm just if you don't want to, you don't have to. What do you guys want to do tonight? You don't want to do so. And we come back to the whole Nietzsche notion of something more romantic about the pursuit of life and truth and God and what have you. Is I just fell in love with all these kids, as kids in their lives. And the way religion played into those conversations is when it was helpful, we would have conversations. And so, I did the thing where at club I would give talks, but they were rarely they weren't very good club talk sermon things where here's the sermon point thing and here's the point at which you make a decision. It was it was legit this is what's going on in my life right now.
Yeah.
And here's how God plays into all that. And that was it. So I didn't have a whole lot of kids standing up at clubs and at camps being I have decided to follow Jesus. I would show up to camp.
Your conversion rate was low.
It was zero. Like I said, but
I imagine you were connecting.
I still talk to some of those kids. And same. My Young Life leader is still a friend of mine. We're still in. He was going to my church when we were still gathering. A millennia ago or whatever. But we're still friends. And that for me is that's how it actually played out. So I actually came into contact with people, and the religious conversation was very organic. I don't love that word, but
I'm fine with that word.
Okay, good. So
that's not a trigger word.
Okay, good. So and it just kind of kept playing out that way, where I would come through the doorway, by way of relationship, I would come through the doorway of some piece of machinery or institutionalized something with regards to faith. So it was Young Life, and it looked like this, and then it was church. Similar, it was I can't do that the way. We're not going to achieve the things we're supposed to achieve. And then it was Christian rock stuff, where I was this is even weirder, and
it is weird.
It is weird, but the thing, every time I showed up somewhere, I would come through the doorway on relationship, and I would just keep falling for people.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was just way more interested. Like, this is, for me, the fact that you and I have a friendship is a much richer fruit of that time than, like, selling records. Like, I don't even know, like, I have records from 2000, from 2002 or 1998 or whatever. Like, I have no freaking idea how many I sold. Zero. I have no idea. But, like, I've known you now for hella days. And this is a richer fruit for me. So all that to say is my religious journey keeps coming back to people. That's it.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I notice. This is something that you notice. I'm getting close to 40, so I'm like 30. I'll be 38 this year, and I notice around this time in life is where I start to look back and go like, oh, you know what, like. There's people all over the world that I feel like I could call and be like, hey, I'm in your city.
Yeah.
Let's get a beer. And like the fact, like that makes me feel rich.
Yes.
Rich in relationships. And that's something, maybe over the last year talking about faith the way I have, a couple of those might be harder beers to have than others, but overall, like it's been interesting to, I guess, reach this point in life and sort of start to look at things so much through that lens, like you're just describing.
Yeah, and again, I think that's again what good religion does is I attend to my own humanity, and as a massive aspect of my own humanity, I attend to, pay attention to, and celebrate my relationships.
Yeah. That's so good. I noticed nowhere in there is everything that you've talked about so far is present. Present tense.
Yes.
It's never like in eternity ...
Yeah.
It's here and now.
Yes.
And that something about that makes me like appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because I think for me, like, so much of the focus of the faith tradition that I sort of came up in was forever.
The future.
The future, forever.
Yep.
It was like end times, look out, mark of the beast, that stuff. And then it was like heaven and hell. Yes. And like for me as a kid, and like for so many people, like the fact that was the focus so often was actually like kind of traumatic. It was, like, because it's like you're always, again with the sort of theme of disembodiment, it's like you're always projecting your thought into the future, into these horrible scenarios, and you read Revelation and you're like, is this for real?
Yeah.
And then people are like, yeah. And I'm like, but then, like the last little while, the last year, I've actually been studying the Bible more than I ever have.
Yeah.
And I'm more fascinated by it than I've ever been.
Yes.
And I look at Jesus, the way he's depicted in at least the Synoptic Gospels, like the first 3 Gospels, it's very much a focus on here and now.
Yes.
Like almost entirely.
Yes.
And that's what I like see reflected in what you're talking about. Yeah. Is that like a purposeful, intentional thing for you, or is that just how you are?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I'm not very future oriented, like naturally. I'm much happier just being where I am. Again,
that's kind of rare, I feel like.
Maybe. On top of that, like, I know I die. Like, I know that I do. And
back to Nietzsche.
And back to Nietzsche. But like having lost as many people as I lost, I know it ends. So that kind of keeps me here, because like I want to squeeze every moment I possibly can. The problem, so when you talk about the way newer evangelicalism, and by newer I mean like 70s, 80s, and up till now, evangelicalism like references like future tense, heaven and hell, eternity. The problem I end up having with that is it always only affects the now. In other words, like I can't do that now. That only affects how I live right now. So when you talk about it's traumatizing, it's designed to be. It's designed to be traumatizing to think constantly about whether or not I'm going to go, where I'm going to go when I die. It's intentionally traumatizing so that I would live differently now, which makes it a control. So it's never really about the future. It's always about.
That is an interesting perspective.
It's always how I'm living now. So if I can keep you in line by saying, these are the things that are required so that you live in eternity peacefully versus living eternity in pain. That's about how you're living now. That's what makes it a control, and that's the thing that's actually traumatic. Like, it's not about actually where you're going to go when you die.
You're saying everything is about now.
Everything is about
It's completely about now. It's just about how you approach now, and by approaching now that way, it's more about control, but there's other ways to approach now.
Yeah, there's not enough in the scriptures. There's not enough in the Christian scriptures to justify the amount of time anyone spends talking about where people go when they die. There's just nothing.
I would agree.
It's like it is not a thing that the writers and editors and assemblers of the Old or New Testament occupied themselves with. It's just not a thing. Like, it's present and in ways, but there aren't like wholesale like teachings. I mean, Christ makes references that are somewhat cryptic about like.
Well, and it gets confused in language too, because if we open our New Testament, we see the word hell quite a bit, but it's like, well, what word is being translated into hell? It's like if Jesus is talking about Gehenna, like then that's one thing. If we're talking about Hades, that's a decidedly Greek reference.
Yes.
And like in the Old Testament, if we're talking about Sheol, then that's something completely different than, until the Hellenistic period, most Jews didn't believe in a soul separate from the body.
Correct.
So it's like there's a long, again, I feel like I'm coming back to embodiment over and over in this conversation, but
yes.
it's like we exist here and now in
yes.
this body, and there's a long tradition in the Bible even of believing that this is where you are rooted in this body. The you that makes you is here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if that's the point, then over concerning myself about what happens when I'm done doesn't actually help me live better. If the point is in other words, if the initial point, even if it's well-intended.
I think I know where you're going.
Even if it's well-intended, if it's well-intended to keep me in line, and not even in like a big corporate, but if like, I want you to live well and not sin because I don't want you to get hurt. If that's the intention, then me being scared about hell doesn't actually help me live well. It helps me live in fear, and fear doesn't help me live well. So if the intention still is me living well in the here and the now, then let's just provide the tools by which I would live well in the here and the now, and then let tomorrow, it's almost as if there's a teaching about this, take care of itself, because tomorrow has its own worries. So I
see that I appreciate. I really appreciate
I am not a naturally future-oriented person, and I've seen enough death that like I know that it happens, and what that has done for me is put me in the position to say I want to live well here and now. I just don't have enough knowledge or information about what happens when a person dies. I have no idea. I don't want to concern myself with it because I'm too busy living.
Yeah, that's good, dude. I talk about sometimes this idea called ahimsa. You familiar with it?
No.
It's like part of yoga practices. It's like it's rooted in there's some blurriness between some of the Eastern spiritual practices, but it's Hindu, Buddhist, sort of. It's in that space. It's one of there's this whole yoga tradition that it's a small part of, but it's basically non-harm. It's a doctrine of non-harm, and it's the closest thing I've found to like a guiding principle of living, right? Of going like, okay, so when I'm considering adopting like a way of being, how is that affecting me? How is that affecting my family? How is that affecting my community and my it ripples out from there, and it seems to me to be the closest thing that I've found to like a sort of universal ethic. And I guess it's like
it's part of, it's the initial part of the Hippocratic Oath, correctly?
Yeah. Do no harm. It's the Hippocratic Oath for everyone. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, but it's it's interesting, and I know that like you can get tripped up because different people might differ on what you consider harm.
Yes.
And also when you have sort of an eternal perspective, if you're thinking about heaven and hell for people,
yes.
like in the future sense,
yes.
then that would change the way you would think about harm
yes.
too. But I mean, if we're keeping things to here and now, you know, the doctrines that I hear sort of you espousing, and then also like what I read in the Synoptic Gospels and Jesus being seemingly so concerned with people less fortunate, the
yes.
needy, and then I read these Eastern sort of ideas of ahimsa, of non-violence or non-harm. Like, it seems like we're collectively onto something here, right?
Yes. One would hope.
Yeah, but it's like we get distracted by the future, or you know, the sort of question of eternity.
Yes. We do. We get distracted by the future. We get distracted by the genre.
That's an important point too.
The religious genre. We get distracted by that, and we forget our humanity. We forget our relationship. It becomes about the idea, and we become disembodied.
Yeah, dude. Well, let's talk about your book.
Yes.
Now let's talk about instead of your title the way that I intend it, let's talk about your title the way that you intend it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and why you wrote it?
Another high school story. So I was in a speech class. This is my sophomore year. And I was in trouble for talking, which is a thing. It's a bit of a task to get in trouble for talking in speech class. But I'm up to that task. And Mr. Ross, who taught the class, barked out my name, Mr. McRoberts, by all means. He said, Mr. McRoberts. And I knew how this went because I'd been there before. So I grabbed my bag and I started heading to the door. He said, nope, come here. And I walk up to the front of the class. And he has me set my bag down next to his desk. And he goes to this closet. It's like I guess it was like a prop closet. And he pulls out this cactus that's like almost my size, inflated cactus. And sets it down next to me, has me stand in front of the class, sets the cactus down, walks out, sits in my desk, and says, okay, Mr. McRoberts, you like to entertain people. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
With a cactus.
So I'm frozen because it's one thing to steal someone else's moment. It's another to have your own and have to make something of it. To be given a moment.
Unexpectedly.
So I'm frozen for I don't know how long. And then the kid that I was mouthing off to, sitting next to or behind Mr. Ross, I don't remember exactly, he gets impatient and says, oh, come on, man. Just pretend like you're in the desert. It's just a cactus. To which Mr. Ross says the thing. He says, no, it's not. It's whatever you make of it. And it took a moment for that to settle in. And then for the last maybe 90 seconds, maybe 120 seconds, it was a space alien. It was a horse. It was a long lost friend because it wasn't a cactus at all. It's a piece of plastic with air in it. And that principle, like the seed of that idea has, honest to God, run through everything, like from then on. And like there are seasons in which I've been conscious of it and seasons in which I wasn't. And I'm just way more conscious of it now.
Yeah.
Because I'm practiced at it and I've coached other people in it. But I started to recognize the way nothing actually is what it is. That the set of circumstances I'm born into don't define me. What I do with them does, which is the whole conversation around privilege.
Yeah.
So that I am privileged isn't the question. It's what I do with my privilege. Or systemic racism, as monolithic and massive and seemingly immovable as racism is in institutionalized white America, it didn't fall out of the freaking sky.
No.
The institutionalized practice of racism was established by the constant decision making of powerful whites over the course of years, it was made that way, which is to say it can be unmade. Mm-hmm. So there really is nothing in life, with very, very rare exception, that simply is what it is. It almost always is a matter of like someone's will and work has formed the thing.
We hear people say it is what it is quite often.
I can't stand it. It is what it is a way to quit. It's a way to abdicate my responsibility. Mm. And like sometimes it's probably not great for me to try to be responsible to things, but like in general, as a life principle, it's trash.
You know what's funny though is that when I have a sort of philosophy around quitting.
Yes.
I'm a fan.
Well, okay,
go. So sometimes when people say like quitting in like a negative sense, I always feel super contrarian because I'm just because I'm always like, oh, so it's a thing I like then. But I'm being obtuse. I know what you mean. It's like it's like people say it is what it is when they've decided not to make something else of it.
Or even to like...
or that they don't want to, or that they...
Yeah, so the choice there is not to simply say this is a thing that is, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
That's not the choice. The choice is to say, this is a thing that I am powerless against, which is a confession of my powerlessness. Confess, if you're powerless, then say you're powerless. But it's not about the thing. It's about you and your power. That's fine. Or, right. I'm not interested in this. That's fine. That's you and your interest. That's fine. But that's not about the thing. Or, I can do something about this and I want to. Those are the actual choices. Those are the real life choices. It isn't really a choice of responsible, capable adults to say it is what it is. I can confess my powerlessness. I can confess my disinterest. Or I can own the place I have in relationship to this thing and do something about it. Those are the actual choices.
That's good. Yeah. Well, and it's funny, like even as you're saying that, I can't help but notice the links to Heiddeger and phenomenology.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which I did not think we were going to get into tonight. I'm really pumped. Yeah, because Heidegger's, sorry, not to just divert us back to Heiddeger all the time, but but like even just thinking about the way that we're living in a world of our own creation individually to a degree. It's like we have these human experiences, but there's so much that's available for us to perceive that we just can't take it all in, right?
Correct.
So we create our own perceptual frame, and we go like right now, there's like all this detail in the wood of the deck that we're sitting on.
Yes.
But I'm not spending time thinking about the grains in the wood because I don't have enough mental capacity to think about that at the same time as I'm thinking about the fact that there's a red light on the camera.
And I'm just wildly interesting, and so you don't have.
I only have enough attention for you.
Exactly, you don't have enough for the wood.
But that's really interesting because it's actually really encouraging. Because the way to take what you're talking about and apply it, I've experienced. Oh, hold on, I can fix this. It's 9:00.
Is that a thing?
I have it on a timer.
That's awesome.
Hold on. Turn on the string lights.
All right, turning on string lights.
Smart devices aren't incredibly smart. But to apply, to sort of take what you're saying and make it like a sort of an applied thing. Shit, the freaking lights really got me. They really got me.
Nothing is what it is.
Yeah.
It has the choices available to me are, I can do something about this, and I care about it, or I'm not interested in this, and I'm powerless against it.
There we go.
Those are the actual choices.
Yep.
But the core of it is about agency.
Yes.
It's entirely about agency.
Yes.
And I can either offer my agency or not offer my agency. And that's either like I can't because I feel like I'm powerless, or I don't want to because I'm not interested, or I can because I can make some impact, and I want to because I am interested. Those are literally that's what it means to be alive.
Yeah. what I find super encouraging about that, and this is the applied idea I had before the lights went out and I lost my mind, is that like for so many people, and I've been in this season many times, that like you feel like things have to be the way that they are. Your life has to look the way that it is, and you're stuck. And anytime I've ever wrestled with depression, it's usually been associated with the feeling that whatever I'm in right now will continue indefinitely.
Yes.
If I see a possibility for life to look wildly different, I'll be encouraged, right?
Yes.
Like I'll be like, oh, there's possibilities, there's options. Who knows what might happen? Like all of a sudden that lifts me out of that depressive state. But if I feel like I'm stuck and I can't change anything,
yes,
it's incredibly depressing to me, and I think for a lot of people.
Yes.
But what I love about what you're saying is like you're talking about like things do not have to be the way that they are. And for me, the way that in my life, the way that whenever I've needed a change, the way I've made it happen is I've laid out my non-negotiables. And I've gone like, okay, what are the things that I believe are non-negotiable?
That's
like,
good.
That have to be present in my life.
Yes.
I write them down sometimes. And Jess and I have been through, well, I should say Jess has been through this because of me many times. Like I've put her through this
in a
many
way,
times.
Jess and I have been through this. What that really means is
it's my fault. But like if we feel stuck, we'll sit and go like, what are our non-negotiables? What are the things that we think have to be?
Yes.
That are keeping us in this place where we don't see options.
That's good.
And then we go, are these actually non-negotiables?
That's very good, man.
What if we threw one of these away, or a couple of them? And anytime we've ever made a massive life change, it's always been preceded by a moment like that.
Yes.
And it's once you get rid of a couple of, maybe only one sometimes, of your non-negotiables, the things that you feel have to be, that maybe don't have to be.
Yes.
When you get rid of one of those things, all of a sudden you gain this ability to make it something new.
Yes. This is part of what
it can be what you make of it at that
and this
point.
is part of what Merton was getting after when he wrote about like the war. He wouldn't use the word war, but that like your most difficult. I'm gonna blow his language here, but basically, like the hardest battle you have to fight is the one against yourself. And that sounds super cheesy the way I say it, but ultimately it's like there's no more there's no more a dangerous or capable nemesis than your own self. What that ultimately means is I come in conflict with my own will. So when you talk about your non-negotiables, part of what you make, part of that list of things is like these ultimately are still going to be decisions you've made about how you are living your life. Like no one set those things. These are patterns or decisions you made about things you want, things you. Those are. It might be I
have to have this career. It might be I have to live in this place. It might be I have to live in a house and not an apartment.
Yes.
It might be I have to drive this car. It might be I have to.
All of those are expressions of will. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Just some of them end up seeming so big. So a mortgage on a house and a property, all that seems so big, and it's not that it's not big. But that's all that it is big. It's not immovable. And part of what people figured out during the pandemic and things getting shut down is like things you thought weren't movable are definitely movable.
Yeah.
Things you thought would be forever aren't.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that was taken away by a matter of will. We chose, and that's just, I get it. Like this is not a slight on anybody. We chose not to go to work because we felt like that was the best decision. It's not like there was, in like the pandemic, like the actual.
It should be said that not everyone had that opportunity.
Not everyone had that opportunity, but even for those who didn't have that opportunity, someone else set that circumstance. So if you're someone who worked in like a big box Amazon shop, right?
Yep.
Whoever's running that shop, whether it's Bezos or whoever, like someone else made a decision, and by that sheer act of will, you are no longer capable of doing a thing that you want to or don't want to do. So it's still an act of will. So all our non-negotiables, all our big monolithic things are all and only expressions of will. Some of them are just bigger and heavier than others.
Yeah. So how does that, throughout the course of your book, how does that? I haven't made it all the way through. I have to confess.
That's fine.
So I'm like I got part way and I was like, I was like, okay, I don't want to spoil the conversation. So like, here's a good question. Like, who do you think are the people that need this the most?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know who needs it the most. The folks I hope get it.
I read it through a creative lens.
Yeah, the folks I hope get it. Yeah, the folks
yeah.
I hope get it are folks who have an idea that they really like and have not given it, and people who have an idea they really like and have not given that idea its due.
Yeah.
Or its time. Especially now. Again, this is like a few days after Easter. We're going to go from April to May to June. As things begin to open up again and life returns to something that'll never be normal again. But like post-pandemic life, right? Things are still super, super shaky.
Yeah.
This is not the time, I would suggest, to double down on security. Because if we learned a thing, I would hope, if we learned a thing through the pandemic, is that anything you were counting on to be secure can be stolen from you in a freaking heartbeat.
Yeah.
So, take the shot on the thing that's in your guts to do. If you're going to learn a lesson from the pandemic, it is not try to figure out how to be more secure to stem the tide of to stem the next tide. Because something else will happen. It's either going to be in your personal life, it could be economically, it could be politically. Something else is going to happen that's going to be a roadblock. Like it's not like you come to the end of 2021, pandemic gone, we're all good. Other crap will come up and will steal things that you want.
Yeah.
So don't double down on safety. Don't double down on security. Take your shot. That's the people I want to have this book are the folks who are like, you have an idea and you've never given it a time. You haven't given it space in your calendar. You haven't like put money in it. Do that now.
You're speaking to me, man.
I know.
That's so good. Well, dude, thank you for sharing all of this. This conversation took twists and turns I was not expecting, and I'm so here for it.
Good.
Man. How can people find you? How can people support what you do? What are the best places for them to check out?
So Instagram, I'm there every day, a lot.
Yeah, and you post like really awesome. I mean, I repost your stuff a lot because
thanks, man.
You post poetry.
Yeah.
It's funny, like my concept of poetry is I'm stupid when it comes to poetry. I'm like
But I'm so glad you like mine.
Well, I hope that doesn't feel like a
no, it doesn't.
I don't think for the longest time I didn't think I got poetry, and in the last couple of years I was like, oh, there's no rules.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yes,
got it.
There you go. We can do
got
that.
it. I was looking for the rules and I couldn't sense them.
No, it's not.
But on Instagram you post daily on Instagram, right?
Yeah, at least once a day.
Yeah.
It's been a discipline for the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, so Instagram, and then you do Patreon.
I have a Patreon. It's just Justin McRoberts. Everything is just my name, so it's just Justin McRoberts.
That is convenient.
It is convenient. Again, I'm terrible at branding, so I just went with the name.
That's good. And then the book is called
It Is What You Make of It. It comes out on June 1st.
June 1st. It's available for pre-order now.
Yes, please.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Justin,
man.
thanks, man.
My pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We did not finish the bottle.
No, I would have been tragic.
Okay, that was my conversation with Justin. I hope you really loved it. Thank you guys so much for listening and for watching. And hit me up on Twitter at John Steingart if you had thoughts about this episode. I would love to hear from you. Take care, guys. Until next time, stay curious.